Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There it is, so you don't miss any of our football content this season. It has been, if I might say, fantastic. Presented by Uber Eats, which I order every week. Get game day deals all season long on Uber Eats. Before we get into our analysis, once again, all this football talk has got me hungry. So we have Buffalo Wild Wings. By the way, this stuff is so good. I don't know how often you order Buffalo Wild Wings. It's fantastic. When I was in Vegas out of college, I got a new chicken wings. Could be my favorite thing in the world. And I don't want to hear anything about health food. If you need abs at 45 years old, that's your problem. I don't. Buffalo Wild Wings. It's easy to order game day food on Uber Eats. I was craving Buffalo Wild Wings today, right around the corner from where I'm at. So these guys have game day deliveries dialed in. Not only that, Uber Eats is running deals all season long. So, whatever you want. You can do pizzas, burritos, Buffalo Wild Wings. 2 orders of spicy wings I got today. Perfect. Right now they have buy one, get one free 6-piece boneless wings from Buffalo Wild Wings through December 29th. Perfect for game day or leg day, any day really. And as the official on-demand food delivery partner of the NFL, Uber Eats keeping the deals going all season long. So must-grab deals on burgers, chicken tenders, sandwiches, soups, whatever you want all season. Order Buffalo Wild Wings on Uber Eats now for game day. Terms apply. See the app for details. All right, here we go on a Sunday night. I took a brutal beating. In the early games, I not only went 0 for 4, they all got blown out. I've never had one of those. I've had bad weekends. I've not been on the wrong side of everything. And I liked Army. I mean, everything went wrong. Thank God there wasn't a big college football weekend. So let's start with Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts, the guy had nothing but time. The O-line for Philadelphia was fantastic. He's 25 of 32. 2 touchdowns, no picks. It was really to watch him kind of do whatever he wanted to do in the second half. 27-13 Philadelphia. Now George Pickens was out for Pittsburgh. He was a go either way. If I could do it over again, I wouldn't have taken the Steelers with him out again. I guess it's the hamstring. But, that second half for Philadelphia, I can say all I want about Nick Sirianni. That second half, we always say script first half, second half is players. I don't know what to make of it. Pittsburgh's defense, they clinched, by the way, a playoff spot, even losing because of the Chargers loss. What did you make of Philadelphia? It's kind of jaw-dropping.
I was pacing around before the afternoon game started, and I thought about putting a large wager on the Steelers' money line. And I thought about 10 minutes into that game, it was obvious the Steelers were in major trouble. They could not cover the 2 wide receivers. The game plan's always going to be to corral Saquon Barkley. Well, they held him. He didn't sniff 100 yards.
Yeah.
Well, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith had 20 catches over 200 yards, and they each had a touchdown. That had to be, given the circumstance and the level of competition, one of Jalen's best games in a long, long time. He was under complete control. Kellen Moore, I thought the 2 coordinators, Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, dominated that game. And listen, Sirianni's the head coach, so he's getting credit too. That was a dominant team effort, start to finish.
Yeah, Najee Harris's fumble, the little bit of life Pittsburgh had in the second half when Najee Harris fumbles as they're driving in. They weren't taking a lead, but they were competitive.
Yeah.
It was funny. They only had 80 first half yards, and they only trailed 17-13. So I'm like, God, if they can just muster 250, they have a chance to pull it out, and then Najee Harris fumbled. It's one of those things, and I try to avoid this. I try to avoid confirmation bias. And, Dan Campbell is what he is, even today with that onside kick. He's just a risk taker. I don't like his situational football. But I do feel like Sirianni's one of those coaches. I used to cover Mike Bellotti was the coach of Oregon, and I always thought Mike was a good coach, highly dependent on his coordinators. So, and that's okay. I didn't feel that as much with Belichick or an Andy Reid, especially Andy Reid. But Steve Spagnuolo obviously elevates him. But is it possible that Sirianni's a solid to good coach, highly reliant on coordinators, and it looks like he's hit on two more. So he had 2 hits, 2 misses, and 2 hits.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of CEO head coaches are very dependent on coordinators. Sirianni is an offensive guy and he can't call the offense. So it's a pretty unique circumstance. I mean, Tomlin's defenses are always awesome, and he obviously has a huge role in that. If you watch that, 4-team Hard Knocks, he's sitting in with the defense. He plays a big role in the mentality. Sirianni, I mean, he's getting into it at the end of the game with Jalen Carter and the defensive line coach and Big Dom separating everybody. After it's just the Eagles have an infrastructure of they're like a collegiate team that's like Georgia or LSU, where they got a pipeline to elite players, and it starts with the front office and Howie Roseman. I mean, they got good players everywhere. I mean, their defensive line, they invest the offensive line, the coaching staff. He inherits Stoutland, who is an incredible offensive line coach. I think, Brady was on that call. He's talking about, Mekhi Becton was a disaster with the Jets. They're like, yeah, we'll take him and we'll move him to right guard, and then he'll be one of the better guards in the season, in the year. How many teams could have pulled that off? Probably not many. So they're really good at talent evaluation. They take big swings and they hit on a lot of them. I talked to a buddy over the last week about Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter could not have functioned in a lot of places. I think some of the teams that passed on him, like Atlanta, get a lot of shit. The Eagles were uniquely equipped. I think with, veteran defensive linemen. They had Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham still around. And now Vic Fangio around him can really, Vic's been around the block a few times. But the talent today, the Eagles just have more talent. And Russell Wilson, he's been good this season, but you remove George Pickens and you saw today against a better team, it was like, whoa, they got issues. I mean, their passing game, tight end's a good player, but outside, little guy Austin can only do so much. What's he? He's not that tall of a guy. So Russell doesn't have his DK Metcalf, his George Pickens, where he can just throw that lollipop to. You felt it today big time.
Yeah, you feel with a lot of teams in the NFL. I mean, obviously the Bills are very much led by Josh Allen.
Yeah.
But you feel with certain teams, like even good teams, you feel, you're sort of led by an individual player. Pittsburgh, without George Pickens, it's just not the same team. But you start watching Philadelphia today, and there are Sundays that Saquon Barkley and the O-line dominate. Today it was their wide receivers and Jalen Hurts. Sometimes it's their defensive front. I don't know. I watched Philadelphia today, and I don't want to overreact, and I'm looking at some notes here. It is really hard to watch that game today with Philadelphia, and I'm looking at some notes here. Pittsburgh's first half offense, 2.7 yards a play. I mean, how do you not put the Eagles in the Super Bowl? Nothing against Detroit. I love their offense. They are so beat up defensively now. I watched Philadelphia. Today. I watched Philadelphia, and I'm like, I don't even think Detroit matches up with them. Do you?
No. Well, not right now with their defense. I mean, they lost McNeil today to a foot injury, immediately out. They've already missing a bunch of guys. One thing that jumped out to me this week is when the A.J. Brown thing happened on Sunday, and then Brandon Graham goes on his radio show and basically says, they're calling it fake news. Like, the story wasn't created by the media. It was created by their player saying they don't like each other. So I was pretty excited to see Sirianni in that press conference, because even he kind of opens up like, I know we got a big game this week, but I understand the questions aren't going to be about that. I thought it was pretty impressive the way he handled the press conference in regards to AJ and Jalen. And you talk about a guy who's been under the firing line now for a couple of years in the pressure cooker of Philadelphia. Just the way he kind of I would say dimmed the fire. He couldn't put it out because that's not going to happen in Philadelphia, but he could settle it a little bit. And by game time, he's got 8 catches, 110 yards, and a touchdown. And everyone knew that they were going to, involve him in the offense, but he was really involved in the offense. So now everyone's happy. The great part about the NFL, unlike a lot of industries where it's like half the company doesn't care about the quarterly earnings. In football, if you win, it'll quiet everyone down. If you get a wide receiver a few passes, everyone will take a deep breath. And that's what happened. So it's like, oh, how are they going to look? Because if it went weird today with Jalen and AJ, and even if they won, it'd be like, oh, something's still up. No one can say anything now.
Well, and I also think sometimes And I keep going back to Sirianni, but people do, even talented people, they learn on the job. I've told the story before. I had a friend, she was really talented and she took a job. She was working at Oracle for years and years, and she took a job at Google. And she said the first 6 months she was terrified. She literally would drive to work panicking. I don't know what I'm doing. And I remember telling her, like, that's what you should be doing in life. You should never be ready for a job. You should be qualified, talented enough to excel, but who's ready to coach the Philadelphia Eagles? That's never been a head coach. No. Chip Kelly's got caught between the crosshairs of Howie and Lurie and the media, and Chip Kelly'd been a head coach. And I think Philadelphia is just uniquely difficult. It's a hard place to coach. The media has impact. The GM's the strongest and the most opinionated in the league. You work for the organization. There are tough places to coach in this league. Green Bay, no owner, small media, very, I would say, static, stoic front office, no yellers, no screamers, Mark Murphy. That's a pretty easy, and they get the quarterback right. So you almost always have a quarterback. Philadelphia is one of the rare, excellent franchises, very difficult to coach.
You also didn't, obviously in the climate now with social media and the internet, I would imagine when Andy took over in the late 90s for Ray Rhodes, it was intense then, but it's got to be on steroids now with the version of the internet and the pressure with social media with all the players. I think you left out a key figure too. Is the owner's got opinions, Colin. Now, I wouldn't call Jeffrey Lurie is a very supportive, he's a great owner to work for because the checkbook's always open, anything you need. But he's got takes. I wasn't invited to these meetings, but clearly when Doug got kind of pushed out every week, it wasn't just Howie meeting with him. The owner was there. The owner's son now is involved analytically, the analytic department, because that's kind of Howie's, I would call a true hybrid. He does everything. He watches tape, but, from contracts to analytic, he's involved in it all. So there's just a lot of people in the kitchen, but they function that well or that way, right? They're very comfortable in a dysfunctional, pressure-filled operation because they've been good really now. The moment Andy showed up, they have really been consistently good. Moving on, Kyle, they're 12-2. They were just, last year they were 9-1, 10-1, and they truly fell apart, but they were still 10-1. Think how many teams would just die to even have that ability.
Think about this. They fired Doug Peterson. He won a Super Bowl. They fired Chip Kelly. He had a winning record. So you start looking at them. Yeah. They've been good for about 25 straight years. Mostly. They've been a good franchise.
I think one thing they're really talented at is pivoting. And you talk about this a lot. They will pivot fast. And when they did that off Carson Wentz and they accumulated all those picks and then they could maneuver, they could trade one pick for A.J. Brown. They still had multiple ones. They're always doing shit. And they're always, look at the Saquon acquisition. Tomlin this week called it the best acquisition of the offseason. He was available to everybody. Now, I understand he was more inclined, kind of chip on his shoulder for the Giants, but it's not like Howie offered him $50 million. So listen, he wanted to go there. They gave him $27 million guaranteed. We see in free agency, guards are getting 50. So Howie was aggressive, and it's been perfect. But A.J. Brown, why is he on the team? He was aggressive. He gave a first-round pick. They're just very, very aggressive. Listen, you talk about being nervous. It's really served me in my life well. I think since I left the Eagles, that's an intense place to work. And Howie is an intense guy. And if you can handle that and survive that, you could handle most things in life. And he is I still have a lot of friends there, including Howie. His personality is his personality. And it starts there. Sirianni's a high emotional guy. And that's why I think Dom's there to kind of, last year he became a star with a pushing incident with Dre Greenlaw, or became his name. Everyone knew who he was. But he's really there just to calm who was in the middle of Jalen Carter, highly emotional, crazy guy who just had an awful penalty, and Sirianni screaming at each other. Dom's right there trying to pull them all back. So I think they just know how to function kind of in dysfunction. And they do it at an extreme. Beside the Chiefs over the last, and the Bills over the last 4 years, who's won more games?
Well, it's the most wonderful time of the year for getting in on all the basketball, football, hockey action at DraftKings Sportsbook. It's the season of giving, so we're being gifted college football and basketball, pro football, basketball, pro hockey too, almost 24/7. It's an absolutely great time of the year. So a lot of games every day, so many opportunities to place your first bet. Now, if you're going to bet for the first time, just make it simple. Pick a team to win, any team. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook. They have an app. Download it in 90 seconds. Here's the gift for all new customers. Bet $5, just $5. If your bet wins, you get $150 in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. The code is Colin, Colin. New customers, $150 in bonus bets if you bet $5 and it wins. Happy holidays from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Okay, Buffalo 48, Lions 35. I thought the Lions off rest despite some defensive injuries. I thought Buffalo's defense it was just a sieve against the Rams. Well, it wasn't great today, but the Lions couldn't get any rhythm. I thought you saw Goff's lack of mobility in key spots juxtaposed against Josh Allen's athletic ability. It felt like the difference in the game is that if you really look, it was 21-14 at half, and Buffalo was just clearly the better team. But I really think, and I think I said something like this last week, there were things about Detroit today. Again, they were banged up. And the Rams' young defense is good, but Josh Allen had his way as well against the Rams. I think you can make an argument, and I don't think what I'm saying is even shocking. I think Josh Allen may be the most talented quarterback, not only to play this game, but I think he's sort of distanced himself from Mahomes and John Elway in terms of his running now. I mean, he doesn't even have to do it. They had over 500 yards. I always thought Elway and Mahomes, I thought those are the two most talented, athletes. I mean, Marino was great, but he wasn't that athlete. Brady's obviously highly productive. I think Allen is separated from even like Elway and Mahomes in terms of just raw traits, horsepower. I'm watching him today. If there was a league above the NFL, there'd be about 12 guys in it, and he would be the first teamer. I don't know how you defend him. Now they have a run game. God, James Cook averaged 8.6 yards per play. How many one-handed catches did they make today? But to me, it all goes back to Allen. How do you defend him?
Yeah, I thought today it kind of became official, like he's the MVP of the league, and now he can check that box.
And the best player.
Yeah, to me, it's clear. Like I think there's a gap. Honestly, I would say Lamar is a better player right now than Mahomes. Now, it's not, you could make arguments for Mahomes' cast, but I think, Josh is one. I've been saying forever, if you talk to anyone with the Chiefs, like they've played all these guys in the big games. He is by far the harder guy for them to play of anyone in the NFL.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even close. He has played excellent against them specifically, a team that nobody plays well against. The Niners crumble, Lamar crumbles. Yet Josh Allen, when you look at his numbers, won in the playoffs. That's the other thing. Oftentimes, like, let's face it, Lamar is kind of the NFL's version of like Harden and Russell right now. What he's doing in the regular season now, like he's an elite regular season player. His numbers are always going to be elite. He is at the point now it's simply going to be judged on the couple games in January, right? Well, now Josh, he's going to get that MVP, so he's going to be. But his playoff numbers have been excellent. If anything, his coach has cost him the game a couple times. His field goal kicker has cost him the game. But I think, he's the first player you talk about, like what he's doing right now compared to these older greats. I saw a tweet. He's the first player since 1948 to have back-to-back games with 2 passing touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
So he's playing with the greatest rushing quarterback of all time in Lamar Jackson, and Lamar's never even done that. So it's like now they got a real running back, which is something they've lacked over the last 3 or 4 years. And James became that last year, and he's carried it over. Well, Josh is one of the better running quarterbacks I've ever seen. So you have a great running quarterback and an elite running back, and then the passing game. They are kind of like the Rodgers Packers, it feels like. If they played in a dome, they would be borderline unbeatable. Because we've seen him now back-to-back games in a dome.
Yes.
And he's looked like a video game player. It's been completely unfair.
Yeah, it's when the Mariners built that new stadium, Safeco, they called it like the stadium that Griffey built. It was like it felt like Seattle.
Did he even play there? Didn't he leave?
Yeah. So, it felt like Seattle may lose baseball. And then
Yeah.
the Ken Griffey, they beat the Yankees. They eventually went on the Mariners to lose to a better Cleveland team, but it was like it was the impetus to get a new stadium from the outdated Kingdom. And with Buffalo, when I see the new stadium, they have covered it for fans. But if that game would have been played today in Buffalo, that a blizzard. I mean, it would have been 17-13, maybe. You couldn't have seen the field. And I am a little surprised that Buffalo didn't go, listen, we have 9 years of this guy. We may just want to build a stadium to really, I know it sounds weird. We all know that, like, that you cut the grass in football. If you've got a faster team, you want to play on a fast track. If you have a slower team, remember the Charlie Weiss, who was it? Notre Dame's team that lost to Pete Carroll and USC. Who was the Notre Dame coach? I forget.
It was Weiss, like Brady Quinn and those guys.
Yeah. And that USC had Reggie Bush, and they were saying that they hadn't mowed the grass in a week. They wanted it thick. But you watch Buffalo and you think to yourself, that weather now almost is the only thing that can beat him. Like him playing in a blizzard. If you put him in normal weather indoors, I mean, we are watching the Ohtani of the NFL. He's just different than everybody else.
I always thought about this with the Packers, over the Favre, Rodgers. And I know their defense over the Rodgers era let them down in some big games. But they had years with those two guys where it was like, if you put them in a controlled environment, you were not going to have a better quarterback on the field than that guy. But in freezing cold, I mean, the coldest places to play in the league, ironically, it feels like, I mean, with good teams, the Bears suck, are Green Bay and Buffalo, who consistently, and the Chiefs. And like the Chiefs have built themselves into a defensive team and a gritty team. The the Packers, they're about to play, but I mean, they are built offensive weapons. Buffalo they want to play like the greatest show on turf. Look how comfortable they have been these last 2 weeks. It's just hard to do that in a blizzard. But I think right now, I mean, I think Mahomes, it looks like he's going to be okay. But how would you not pick Buffalo to represent the AFC if this guy's going to play like this? As long as he's healthy, I would bet on him to win the AFC.
Yeah, right now, Philadelphia and Buffalo feel like, if not safe, prohibitive favorites to play in the Super Bowl. It's interesting. We have so many topics today. I thought it was interesting. The Broncos, now was the final 31-13 over the Colts, the Broncos 31-13. So Bo Nix had 3 picks
31-13.
and also finished with 3 touchdowns. I got to tell you something. The Colts had a great game plan, dominated early, 20-7 lead. If Jonathan Taylor doesn't drop, I never thought of Jonathan Taylor as a knucklehead. But the minute he did that, I just kind of put him in a different camp. I'm like, oh, you're one of those guys. Like, okay. Jonathan Taylor, for the uninitiated, dropped a long touchdown run at the goal line, and it's called back. But what I thought was really interesting today is Bo Nix was overshooting his targets, really struggling. They both had time off, so he came in with a ton of energy and didn't use it to his advantage. But they go in at halftime, and Anthony Richardson at one point was 12 for 29, no touchdowns, 2 picks. That was classic coaching. They made adjustments at halftime, and the Colts offense dried up. And Bo Nix, despite a horrible first half, John, they didn't quit on him. They did not quit. They had a huge return by Mims. They continued to let Bo Nix throw. And my 2 takeaways in this game is I'm not sure Anthony Richardson, I'm not sure he's a starting quarterback in the league. I just don't think he sees the field at all. And my second take is Sean Payton's the coach of the year. This team is going to make the playoffs. And they're not only going to make the playoffs, they now can win when they play poorly. They beat the Jets when they played poorly on the road. They played poorly for 3 quarters today. How surprised are you by it?
Well, I thought at one point in time in the game, it felt like there were 25 turnovers. They were throwing picks every other series. I think, I mean, how good is Benito, the pass rusher that had the
Holy
pick six
God
against? And I thought that play was pretty symbolic. The game's kind of on the line, and they have a top 5 quarterback, and they got to run a crazy trick play. Why? Because the guy can't function. I mean, I really think Jonathan Taylor's lucky that his quarterback's such a disaster, because that story's going to, I would say, overtake his drop. He was that bad. He was atrocious. You can't function with him, Colin. I mean, you can't. You saw Bo Nix. Listen, he looked like a rookie early in that game. He got fooled on a pass. He threw another pass right to a linebacker. It was just your classic. When Jonathan Taylor was running the ball in there, you just went, "Hey, this is one of your classic rookie games where he just has a complete dud. You lose, but it's not the end of the world. Colts are desperate. Their season's on the line." And then that all of a sudden, I looked up and I was like, "How did Denver have the ball?" And then you look and you
Denver
realize what happened. And then that all
Denver
flipped.
went Denver outscored Indy 24 to nothing after the Taylor fumble, forced 3 turnovers, including a pick six. And I think to your point is the Taylor fumble will get all the attention. But now think about this. We all know how good Shane Steichen is. That goes without saying. He made Jalen Hurts an MVP level quarterback. Jalen Hurts today looked like that regularly with Shane Steichen.
Yeah.
That's what he looked like all the time with Shane Steichen. Now it's an outlier. Justin Herbert broke records. He made Gardner Minshew last year, like one game from the playoffs. He couldn't do anything in the second half. Like he has halves. He can't do anything with Anthony Richardson. Bo Nix can struggle, but John, they'll go into half, they'll come out, and Bo Nix is firing and accurate and moving. Like there's a big gap between those two.
To me, Bo Nix has a rhythm and a feel to his game and can function from within the pocket. Now he's still got to get better. He's a rookie. Anthony
Yeah.
Richardson has no feel, cannot function, has no touch. I mean, he threw a pick today on like a lollipop throw. It was like, what? It looked like a junior high pass.
Yeah.
And obviously, and I think these are the worst type players, are the ones that are truly physically gifted. Because it's like, if we could just, I think you could just go, this is never going to work. I mean, the likelihood, we have seen the occasional guys improve on accuracy. You know, Josh Allen's a great example. Lamar clearly, Anthony Richardson feels like he regresses. Or not
Yeah.
even, he's just bad. He just, when it comes to throwing from within the pocket, you cannot function in the modern day NFL with a quarterback like that. And why Denver was in such trouble before he dropped the ball is like, they're going to get 280 yards on the ground between Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor. That's the only way they can beat you.
Yeah.
But then they got the lead, and all of a sudden Anthony Richardson had to pass. And it was like, this is not going to work. And I don't think that's coachable at this point. You know, I think it's clear he has touch, feel issues that you just can't overcome. Listen, Jalen Hurts is never going to be Peyton Manning or Aaron Rodgers from the pocket, right? Or Drew Brees or a true pocket quarterback. But you go back to Oklahoma and Alabama, there is a feel to play quarterback. There are things he does pretty well. Even Anthony Richardson on the move, like one thing Jalen does a great job of is when he scrambles, keeps his eyes, and can make a very accurate pass. You watch Anthony Richardson scrambles, and he'll throw these 200-mile-an-hour fastballs that will skip by the wide receiver's feet, who's kind of open running back to the sideline. You're like, I just don't think he can get his body to do touch passes. And I think it's very, very difficult for a guy. And listen, we've seen this in baseball for a long time. Guys that only throw 100 and got nothing else, and they can't throw a strike. Usually, all of a sudden, the light doesn't switch, or the switch doesn't light up and go, boom. Okay, I'm accurate now, or I can throw a bunch of strikes. It feels. I don't listen. I'm no expert on mechanics with throwing, but there is some twitch muscle in his shoulder that doesn't allow him. Jalen, some of these, Kyler Murray, I watched him when he scrambles, he can do touch lollipop passes. Anthony Richardson is just throwing as hard as humanly possible. He would have way more picks if he didn't throw the ball so hard.
I look at all these games because I want to talk about Brock Purdy, Belichick, and the Heisman Trophy with you. But I will say, I'll just throw this out there: Bucs 40, Chargers 17. 6 straight defensive stops. Todd Bowles in that defense against Herbert. The number 1 defense in the league gave up 40. Mike Evans was a problem for the Chargers.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, there's clearly an upper crust right now in the league. Kansas City, I think Baltimore, Buffalo. I think Detroit, maybe Green Bay, by the time we're doing this, if they win tonight in Seattle. I think they will. I think they're a better team, but don't trust me. And I think Philadelphia. Then there's a second level of teams, and I think we put Pittsburgh in there, maybe a Houston, maybe. For whatever reasons, we don't really want to put Tampa in there. But they kicked the shit out of the Chargers today. I mean, Chargers couldn't run on them. Herbert was constantly under duress. Meanwhile, Baker Mayfield had time to throw. Their receivers were beating the secondary for the Chargers. I thought it was. I didn't. By the second half, I didn't even know what the Chargers' offensive plan was. Between Jason Light's roster, the GM, and Baker Mayfield, he and Darnold. And by the way, Baker can still throw really bad picks. He's got him within his game. But I was watching that today, and you can't run on Tampa. Can't run on him. Vita V in the middle, can't run on him. Todd Bowles has always been an excellent defensive coordinator. I'm sitting watching it, and I'm like, they're going to beat somebody in the playoffs. You better be careful. That team, I mean, that's the kind of team that could go to Philadelphia as a 9-point dog. Saquon couldn't run. The weather's crappy, and you end up with a 21-20 football game to me.
Well, they got a couple things going for them. One, they got high-end offensive players. I mean, Bucky Irving is really good.
Yeah.
The running back. Baker Mayfield has played in multiple playoff games now and won them, right? Go back to 2020 against the Steelers, last year against the Eagles. So he's comfortable. He's a bright lights guy. And I'm with you. Early on in that game, he throws that pick. You're like, oh, this Minter Charger defense is going to be tough. And then he settled down. The gap between the offensive skill guys on this team between the two teams was pretty evident. Is J.K. Dobbins Walter Payton or something? How can they lose him and not function in the run game without the guy? I don't get it. I like J.K. Dobbins as much as the next guy. Seems like an impressive guy and good player. But a Harbaugh team has, especially this one with their offensive skill, has no chance against a non-playoff team running the ball for 32 yards. Looking right now, they had 11 rushes for 32 yards. Jim Harbaugh, if you go back since he's been coaching at San Diego, that is a recipe to lose. Now, obviously, they got back or they got behind, so they had to try to get back into the game and throw the ball. But then they're not built to do that. What he's done with Quentin Johnson, to me, is pretty commendable. The guy has 8 touchdowns. I mean, last year we were talking about the guy as a complete bust, and actually he's kind of a functional player. But, it's basically him and McConkey. You're not coming back on Mike Evans, who is going straight to the Hall of Fame. Otten is a good player, right? And McMillan had a big game today. I mean, once they lost Godwin, you went, I don't know. And Evans had hurt the hammy. Evans came back, shows no signs of that hamstring. And other guys have stepped up. And the other thing that at the end of the Brady era, remember, it was like their historically shitty running team. And then a couple years later, they got Bucky Irving, and he's now the starter. And he has big plays every game. And the momentum. Remember when Dorsey drafted Baker? A lot of it was on like the Favre bravado and cockiness. You can't have that in the NFL when you're not playing well. But I would say for the last 2 years in Tampa, his energy is pretty palpable to them. And you feel it when they get rolling. And their best player, Mike Evans, they clearly have a pretty for as shitty as the rapport was with him and OBJ back in the day, theirs is high level. And it showed today. I mean, the Chargers had no answer. And here's the other thing. Obviously, the Chargers can't run the ball. If their defense isn't covering people, they're in major. That's their formula. They can't win any other way.
So the Bucs have won 4 straight. In each game, they've had 400-plus yards and 150-plus rushing yards. So it's White, it's Bucky Irving, it's Baker playing with a ton of confidence, and they had like an unsportsmanlike conduct. They're chirpy. Like they're the worst kind of underdog to play because they think they're better than you, even though they're not. But they're like a relentless. They're like a fighter that's like 40-28 with a good punch. Like they're not refined. They're not terribly polished, but they play like they think they're the best team in the league. And I don't know. I could see them absolutely going and beating a Detroit. I really could. I think first of all, they just, as you said, their skill players are really good. They're really good. And today they gave Baker time to throw. And, a couple of times Baker went out and moved. We always knew in that class that Darnold was a little bit better athlete than Baker. But Baker, remember years ago in Cleveland when he screwed his shoulder up? And I felt for like a year and a half he wasn't right. It felt like he was just always playing hurt. He's healthy now. And he's worked hard at it. He's pretty athletic. He can get up and move.
Well, you saw Jared Goff today. When you hit Jared Goff, he's much more like Cousins. He's not going to run around. I know he had a running first down, but you hit him, it can throw him off. Baker, much more like a lot of these athletic guys in the league. He's some hybrid version of a pocket quarterback, but he definitely has lost weight and he can move. I assumed, like, I like the Chargers today. I thought the Chargers would win at home against the Bucs.
Same.
And the Atlanta plays the Raiders tomorrow, so all of a sudden they'd be tied and Atlanta's beat them twice. I'm like, listen, the Bucs are having a commendable season. They are in the driver's seat right now, Colin, because they end with the Panthers and the Saints. Now the Cowboys are playing pretty well. That's a Sunday night game next week. But I'm gonna like the Bucs in that spot. They easily could win out, and then Atlanta doesn't control their own destiny. If I would have told you at the beginning of the season that Atlanta, after all the hoopla of giving $100 million of basically laughing Belichick out and going with Raheem Morris, missed the playoffs. I mean, because they're only getting one team in, and the Bucs be a huge muscle flex for Baker, for Jason Light, for Todd Bowles. Because when you talk about the chippiness, like I worked with Todd in Philly. Todd doesn't say anything. It starts with Baker. Baker gives him that mentality. And honestly, Jason Light has a little bit of that too. He likes those type players. And they didn't even have Winfield today. So I think the Bucs, I'm with you. They would be a danger because they get a home game. It's the thing. You win the division, even if you host the Lions or Minnesota. Yeah. If you're the 4-5, we've seen them before in that spot win that game, right? Host that game and win it.
So right now, Chiefs, the number 1 seed, Bills second, Steelers third, Texans 4, Broncos 4, Ravens 4. They're all tied, and then the Chargers 7th. So because the Dolphins lost, it's still a 2-game lead for the Chargers over the final playoff spot and the Dodgers and the Chargers. So in the NFC as of right now,
I think the Dolphins stink. I mean, the Dolphins,
give me dink and dunk Tua. Yeah. It's the Eagles and Lions tied for the number 1 seed. Vikings 3, Packers 4. They're playing tonight. Commanders 5, Seahawks 6, Buccaneers 7. Rams are right up against it. So the Rams, Buccaneers, I think the Rams right now are better than the Buccaneers, but I don't think it's by a lot. I think I'll take McVay and Stafford over Bowles and Baker, but that run game, Kyron Williams in that run game, you'd have to win it through the air because you're not running against Tampa. If I said right now, Rams, Tampa, who would you take?
I'd probably take the Rams.
Yeah.
I would give a slight edge. I mean, the coaching edge to McVay. Listen, Baker's having a great year, but I'm taking Stafford. Now, that game, we'll see, because I think there's a pretty good chance that the Rams and Seattle both get into the playoff. Whoever doesn't win the division is the 7 seed, and that's a tough 7 seed. I mean, we saw last year, right? It was Rams Detroit round 1, and the Rams easily could have won that thing in the wild card game.
Yeah,
I would say the same thing about Seattle, depending on their matchup. Like if you told me Seattle was the 7, I think we talked about this, and let's say Minnesota wins that division, and the Eagles are the 1 and Minnesota's the 2. Well, we like Seattle in a dome, right? I mean, with their skill guys. So I think the NFC playoffs, which early is like, I don't know, I think it's going to be pretty good. I think all these underdogs and wildcard teams, the road teams, could win all these road games. That's why getting that number 1 seed for Philly, it'd be pretty tough to go on the road to Philly, right? So they're in the driver's seat now with Detroit, who still has tough games remaining. They still play Minnesota. It's just hard to win these games when you have injuries. That's the other thing with, the Rams. Feels like they're getting healthy. I mean, that Rams game, to win that game, didn't it show you, though, that first half? These are 2 tough physical teams. Pouring rain on the West Coast, they can't function, right? You put that game in the AFC North or Buffalo or Green Bay, those teams are so comfortable. You get the Rams and the Niners, they can't do anything in the first half in just a 55-degree rainstorm.
This week's college football preview is brought to you by our friends at Cosm. It's the world's greatest fan experience. So if you're in LA or Dallas and you want an immersive experience, go check it out. Indiana and Notre Dame, Tennessee versus Ohio State playoff games in the Cosm Immersive Dome this Friday and Saturday, as well as every game is on in the Hall. So Friday, December 20th, it's the Battle of Indiana. The Hoosiers travel to South Bend to face the Fighting Irish. And then Saturday, December 21st, the Tennessee Volunteers go to Columbus to take on the Buckeyes. in the first ever college football playoff games. The winner of that epic matchup goes to face Oregon, the number 1 seed in the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day. How good is that? The Dome is awesome. Been there many times. There are no multi-viewing experiences like the Hall in either market. Take the college football playoffs to a whole new level. Every play comes to life, putting you right on the field. Get tickets now, very easy, at Cosm, C-O-S-M, Cosm.com. I want to touch on this. So there was a story, and it came out today. It's almost if San Francisco leaked it, that Brock Purdy, he's not going to take a Baker deal. He's not going to take a Darnold deal, that he wants in the $55 million range. So just to give you, and the reason I say did they leak it, because he was off a really bad performance where, again, he struggled because it rained a little bit. He's got smaller hands. So against the Rams, 0 touchdowns, 1 pick. Against Buffalo, 11 completions, 94 yards. Green Bay, he was hurt. Kansas City, he was awful. No touchdown, 3 picks. In the 4 big games this year, he's been bad. And again, he can struggle with wet weather. He doesn't have big hands. But when I saw the story coming out, and people say, well, he's beaten Dak 3 times. Well, that doesn't mean anything. Dallas made a bad deal with Dak. Cleveland made a bad deal with Deshaun Watson for other reasons. That doesn't mean San Francisco's beholden to follow them. But when I saw that story on Brock Purdy, my take was, why is it coming out now? I could never pay Brock Purdy $55 million. You're more comfortable with it, though, I think.
$55 million. My deal with Brock Purdy is this. First and foremost, I think we got to look at the way the Niners negotiate. Trent Williams, one of the greatest left tackles ever. They just had a staring contest with him till week 1. Nick Bosa is one of the better players they've had over the last 20 years. He did not have a contract till a couple days before, the season started. So that they do not just hand out money to all-time great talents. Brandon Ayuk, who has been a high-end winning player for them, and he's not a top 10 wide receiver, but a really good player. They had a knockdown dragout. Deebo Samuel carried them to the playoffs in 2021. That was not an easy contract to do. So this guy, listen, his deep ball is a problem right now. It's atrocious. And one thing that separated in that second half, when the rain stopped, Stafford was good. He was not. Now, Deebo had the 1 drop, but he was, I think I saw a stat, 0 of 7 on balls down the field, past 20 yards. And the pick at the end. If you're going to pay a guy like Brock Purdy, right? You saw the Josh Allen play today where he scrambled, got hit late and throw it. He could never dream about doing that. So that's never going to be his game. Well, Drew Brees couldn't dream of doing things Aaron Rodgers did. Steve Young couldn't dream of doing things John Elway did. So they had to be an elite, and this term sounds like a turnoff. These guys are Hall of Famers. Manage the game. Never turn the ball over. Make the great decisions. I could not have a guy who has limited physical skills that has a bad decision in the big games. Season was on the line. Yeah. Right? And that decision to throw it to Juwan Jennings, the game ended. They never got the ball back. And there was multiple check down options. And he has some moments in these bigger games where you're like, the decisions. And listen, obviously the leadership, and he is a good player. Yeah. But to me, I'm offering the Daniel Jones Baker deal, or we're just not doing a deal and we're playing it out. Yeah. Because that's where it's at. Because once I give the 50+ million, well, then I'm paying you like Joshua Lamar, and we already know, no one argues, including his representation or his parents, even Brock, you're not that guy. So I can't pay you that. And then look at the Stephen Jones's comments. We're all in on, probably makes you happy because you want to trade Micah. We're all in on CD and Dak. So we'll see with Micah, right? Well, they're all in on Dak. If they could have that one over, like, was that the right move? And I think when you pay these guys that are somewhere between like 7 and 15, it's got to be perfect. And when it's not perfect, Josh could carry you no matter what. Mahomes can be an awesome player when shit's hitting the fan. Lamar could play with me and you out there and make plays. Brock cannot. We know that much. Yeah. And you just saw against the Rams where it's like all the shit's hitting the fan for both teams. One guy just rises above it. Why? Because he's an elite talent. And he has been for 20 years. Why he was the number 1 pick. And the other guy, who again, I've supported, but I cannot support that decision, the interception, represents what 100% he can never do. Because I got to have you be like, well, he's the smartest player in the league. He makes the best decisions. Wasn't that always a Drew Brees thing? Drew never tried to make passes like Aaron because he knew he couldn't. He didn't try to do that because he had to play within himself. And once I see that, it's like, and sometimes Purdy, this goes back to when he was coming out of college. People liked him. Because remember, his junior year was really good. Iowa State, I think, won 10 games. Then his senior year, lost a couple guys, Brees Hall, and the word was little bit reckless and a gunslinger.
Yeah.
You can't be a gunslinger when you don't have a gun, right? If you have, you got more of a BB gun. That gets back to when people made fun of the Andy Daltons of the world. Their arm's not big enough to play like that, so you got to kind of contain yourself. That's the type of stuff that has to drive Kyle mad, but they're kind of stuck. Like, what else do they do? I looked at the draft order today. They're having this atrocious season. Think of what like the Jets and the Giants and the Jags would do for their season. They're drafting right now like 14th or 15th, depending on how the tiebreakers go. They're not nearly high enough. So it's like, but would they entertain like Drew Aller or something? I don't know. I'm having conversations about everything right now if I'm them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's funny because Brock Purdy, who by the way is also getting a little bit of an injury bug, which considering I mean Josh Allen's banging into people left and right, and he's not dealing with injuries. So, if Brock Purdy was in the last year of his contract, like let's say it ran out, in 3 or 4 weeks, I think they'd go get Darnold again. I really do. I think they'd make a run for Darnold because they're familiar with him. He's an athlete, and you could get him for 40. Nobody's going to pay Sam 60. Hell, you franchise tag him, it's like 40, 41.
Yeah, I have a hard time if I'm Brock's representation, and this is where the market got screwed up because a guy like Trevor Lawrence, who hadn't done anything, got $200 million. Even what you want to say about Dak, like he has a 10-year resume up until this year of winning a lot of games. Like he's been doing it. I think the Trevor Lawrence thing kind of screws the 49ers because if I just be like, well, look at my numbers, look at my wins compared to this guy, right? Even Trevor this year, I mean, it was atrocious before he got injured. But I know the Niners and I know the way Parag operates. Listen, it's John and Kyle, but they're money guy. They do not just hand over money. Now, if you want to take team-friendly deals, they do a lot of those early, or at least they used to when the economics were a little lower with the Willises and the Bowmans and the Frank Gores. Those days get a little harder because these guys drive a hard bargain because of the amount of money, and the Niners stare at you right in the face, and they don't flinch till the last minute where it's Trent, Bosa, okay. But with the Purdy thing, like what's he going to – would he hold out? Would he hold out or do a hold in? I doubt it. And I also think you just give him, here's 3 years, $100 million. We'll guarantee every penny. So like $30 million a year, $32 million. What's he going to do? Not sign it?
Yeah.
I actually think it's a pretty good, relative to your skill set. I think it's a complicated thing because of the previous years, but I think this year has to bode pretty well for them. They've had big spots and he has made mistakes. You can go, well, the talent's not there. And I had a buddy in the league say, I think 2 weeks ago, they were missing $110 million against the Bills. And last week I calculated just between the three guys, Trent, CMC, and Ayuk, it was like almost 80 million. But like, that's welcome to the NFL. A lot of guys get injured. We got to make plays. By the way,
Lamar Jackson entered the season with a rebuilt offensive line, and Derrick Henry was brand new. You just deal with it. I mean, like last year, Mark Andrews was hurt all year. Zay Flowers was a rookie. You just deal with it. This year, Lamar's got a terrible back-end defense. He's got a brand new offensive line. I don't want to hear excuses. Josh Allen for years, this is one of the first years he's had a running back and 2 capable tight ends.
I also think it would be on the table if you're Brock and they're just offering you something that you think Daniel Jones contract, we're not budging. So it's either this or nothing. What if you just went Flacco? Because I say this about the Niners, like they're having an atrocious season with a million injuries, and they're still going to end up with 7 or 8 wins. If they're a little healthier next year and they draft pretty well, they know the type guys they're looking for. What if you go next year, we'll win 11 or 12, and then all of a sudden we're in the second or third round of the playoffs, and then I have more bargaining power? Yep. I think that would be on the table as well. He is, whenever I'm home, maybe they're national commercials too, he's making a lot of money off the field, being the quarterback for the Niners. So what you've always said about Dak, like you can take a little less. You know how much money you make as the Cowboy quarterback? It's like what Mahomes did. His contract's kind of fake. He did the Chiefs a solid, because Patrick knew, we'll keep winning, and I am going to print money. A little Brady style. Why is Brady so valuable? Because he has like 7 championships. If Brady had one, it wouldn't be the same. Why is Mahomes going to be talked about like he's Michael Jordan for the next 50 years? Because he's going to have 4 or 5 championships when it's all said and done. Right? Yeah. So I do think Brock is pretty smart. I could also see the agent, though. I mean, I don't know who his representation is, but I would imagine it's not exactly Tom Condon coming out of the draft as the last pick in the draft. Probably getting ready to cash in, and he's going to deal with a pretty tough negotiator here in the 49ers. I'll promise you that.
Okay. So I have said I think Bill Belichick's going to last 1 year in college. And very interesting, his contract, and the lawyers went after this big time. There's no way Carolina wanted to give this up. Bill can leave July 1st of next year, meaning he could leave before he coaches a single game. Now, he's not going to because nobody hires. So he can leave before he coaches a game. Nobody hires at that point. So that's not the point. The point is one and done is very possible. I think he's going to jettison college football. I think he's going to be aggravated. This staff he's building is a pro staff. They're going to rub people the wrong way in the building. It's going to be Charlie Weiss times 10, where Charlie just wore people out. Charlie was a good enough coach, not a great recruiter, wore people out in the building. I don't think this Belichick group fits college. I think their personalities are curt, outspoken. By pro standards, John, it is rough. It's hard. It doesn't work in many pro environments. It's not going to work in college. There was a story Diana Rossini reported that he showed interest in the Jets. And I'm thinking, if Bill showed interest in the Jets, he hates Woody Johnson. This to me, if you look at his drafts, like Urban Meyer, who told me years ago, I don't watch Sunday football. I'm preparing for the next week. Bill doesn't watch Saturday football. Watch their drafts. The minute he takes over the drafts, he doesn't know what he's doing. NFL guys don't watch a lot of Saturday. College guys don't watch Sunday. I don't know. When I saw that Jet story, what did you make of it?
Well, my first reaction was I don't believe it because Bill, it's been his arch nemesis. The hatred was palpable for the last 25 years. He despised the Jets. Then he finally gets a microphone in front of him for the last 6 months. And he'd pick his spots when to be critical and name people. He never hesitated with Woody Johnson. The moment they hired Robert Saleh, he put all his chips in the middle of the table. I would say was as critical of him as anyone in the quote unquote media, especially like NFL type person. And he didn't talk like that about other people. So my reaction was, listen, I know Mike Tannenbaum, and everyone reported that, Woody didn't tell people this. Mike, who's running the search, told people, and they've known each other since Cleveland. I have a hard time seeing Bill beg the Jets. And that would be an easy one if you're Woody Johnson. Everyone keeps talking about people or Bill flipping the middle finger and the NFL flipping the middle finger to him, bunch of FUs going back and forth. This would be an easy one for Woody. Like, let's put out there that Bill was begging me for a job. Because what's Bill going to do? Leak something when he's in North Carolina? It's kind of like he's just off doing something else. Now, if it is true, which, very credible people are reporting this, pretty embarrassing for Bill that he's begging the Jets for interest. And maybe he knows. And that's obviously the contract. I remember Simmons used to write about like when celebrities would date and one celebrity would be way more famous than the other celebrity. It would be hard to maintain that relationship. It would usually end badly when they were both Demi Moore, Bruce Willis, right? Two famous people, they could work. Well, this is Belichick's fame and his football aura is in a different planet than UNC football. So
Right.
he could take advantage of them in a negotiation that never happens at that level. No one would sign a 5-year contract, a new football coach, and put that in. But also, if it is true he's begging Woody Johnson for the Jets job, is he going to have that many more options in a year? Like, what would he have to do if his stock is low right now? Would he have to go 10-2 in year one? Like, could he just go 6-6 and people would think highly of him? I don't know. I actually kind of believe he just might be stuck there and he's just all in, because the one thing I remember being, I think, in college and reading the Halberstam book, and he can get sentimental only about his father. I think the dad thing means something to him. Yeah. And his dad having coaching there, he brought up that sweatshirt that he had from UNC when he was there. So I just don't think they're going to be the potential options. And I just think he might just be stuck there. But you're right. That was a pretty glaring, like, that's not getting put in any of these contracts.
The fact that he can leave before he coaches a game is wild.
But don't you think the $10 million buyout, even to start, is relatively low? They can't fire these guys 5 years in that their buyouts are $50 million.
Yeah, it just, I think, Urban Meyer just didn't fit pro football. I don't think Bill's personality, I don't think it fits college. He was introduced at a basketball game, and it just looked so odd. It was like, oh, this does. And by the way, I've called multiple people that know Bill, and they just can't wrap their brain around it. So I can root for something. I can simultaneously hope he does well. I want to watch the games, but think it could be a mess. It won't be. It's not like they'll win 4 games. The ACC's bad. Their schedule's embarrassing. They get the toughest game they play is Clemson. I mean, it's a bunch of Wake Forest. I mean, those are the tough ones. Syracuse. It is Duke. It's bad. And North Carolina's always had pretty good players, but I don't know. When I saw the Jet story, I thought, wow.
I judge the quality of a fragrance by the compliments you get. When I wore Ovation for the first time, second time, and third time, usually I walk past somebody and they're like, hey, what you got on? Who over there smelling good? That's the injection of confidence right there to you.
That's right. We want to be at the forefront of using the brand as a gateway for these young athletes. Custom suit, we do a photo shoot, we do video, and it's all about that partnership to create a personal brand.
And I love you guys associating it with more sophistication. Throwing a suit on a kid, sometimes it takes for you to see yourself with a suit on in the mirror to be like, hey, I have more to offer.
Ovation for Men, we're part of Amazon's Black Business Accelerator. Amazon has invested $150 million for the next 4 years to uplift small businesses like myself to scale. Amazon is really putting their money where their mouth is.
They're committed to excellence on every level. They want to scale these businesses to be amongst the best in whatever industry they're in.
You've always been authentic. You've always been pushing excellence.
Well, I appreciate that.
As our slogan says, every man deserves an ovation.
Yes, sir.
Listen, this relationship with Ovation for Men, Richard Sherman, the volume, this is just the beginning.
I appreciate you guys letting me be a part of your journey. If you haven't already checked them out, go out there, get your man some. And get the sport too. And it can be Christmas, birthday, holidays, or yesterday. But make sure you get it.
I want to touch on this. So Ashton Jeanty finished second to Travis Hunter in the Heisman. Now, that's what I would have voted. I think when you have a historically unique player like Travis Hunter who played against much better competition. And my take on college football, in the NFL, it doesn't really matter who you play. If you win your division, you're in. If you qualify for the playoffs, you're in. It does matter in college. That's why there's 4 Big Ten teams in the playoffs, 3 SEC teams in the playoff, and 2 ACC teams in the playoff, because the ACC is weaker. So it does matter who you play in college. And Ashton Jeanty had 270 yards and 6 TDs against Georgia Southern. Now, he was good against Utah State, 186 yards. He was very good against San Jose State and Wyoming and Hawaii and UNLV. He got 3 touchdowns against Oregon. Yeah. I'm not denying any of that. He had 209 yards against Nevada. But it is hard for me with about 80%, because I consider Oregon and UNLV a couple of times pretty solid teams. But it is hard for me in college. Hell, you could probably go every third year and find somebody at Holy Cross, who dialed up big numbers. I do think your schedule matters. I've said this about college football. If your road games, what is your road attendance? If the average road attendance you face is like 33,000, it's different than playing in Camp Randall and the Shoe and Michigan and Autzen. So I wasn't bothered by it. Travis Hunter played against better players. Did it bother you that this kid that's going to go in the first round finished second?
No, I mean, I would have voted. Listen, I got my start out of college in the WAC, which at the time was Boise State, now it turned into the Mountain West. It is not the same. And at Fresno State, Pat Hill always would hang his hat on our 3 non-conference games were against Power 5 big-time opponents. It's a different world than playing New Mexico and San Diego State. And listen, I would say he is a universal favorite amongst the NFL scouting community, Jeanty. Honestly, he's only not because he's like 5'8". Yeah. If he was 6 feet tall or 5'11", I think he'd be a lock top 10 pick. Yeah. I do think he's going to be a fascinating draft prospect because his tape is like, I mean, it's about as unique and dominant as you'll see, but he's small. I mean, you see a 5'8" running back going in the top 15. That's hard, but I think he'll end up going in the first round. I think Travis Hunter, I bet there are a lot of players, let's just pick the last 20 years, either wide receivers or corners, that if they had played the opposite position, if they were wide receiver and they had played corner or corner and played wide receiver, that they could have been elite and been a first-round pick. And they were first-round pick at the position they played. But we have never seen a guy literally play them both since like the leather helmet days and be universally accepted. He's the number one corner. He might not be the number one wide receiver, but he's a lock if he was only a wide receiver to go in the top 10 or 12. I mean, it's in every single game, and you're watching as the season went on, that it's like, he can't. And then he just would. And it's just 110 snaps, 105 snaps, 112 snaps. And in the Big 12, playing corner, which to me is harder than wide receiver to be good at, because that's a passing conference. So he's running around to be able to play wide receiver, and he dominated at. I also thought, one, he sounded like just a great guy, and he feels like an easy person to root for. If you're Colorado and you pulled the trigger on hiring Deion Sanders, I know year one was a disaster, but in terms of the popularity it brought you, it was a win. To be year two, have your first Heisman since the running back in 94, to go 9-3, to have this guy and Shador, which are going to be top 5 picks. I just don't think it gets any better. I mean, it's an all-time turnaround at a program that 90% of the coaches that would have gone there best case this year would have been like 6-6, and there would be no top 10 picks. The guy won a Heisman, and you hear the way, and part of this is why Deion, it's also why I think Bill will be fine in recruiting, is because I think what really, Deion acts like Deion since I was a kid he was playing. He just acts the same. Right. Now he's just a coach. Like, Bill, just be yourself. I think that's why Brian Kelly takes some shit. He kind of acts like he's kind of faking it. He's like being a politician. Like, Saban just felt like Saban, right? Kirby just feels like they're very comfortable in their own skin. Even Chip, Chip's kind of honorary. He's not going to kiss your ass, but that's how he's been for 15, 20 years. And I think Deion, it's remarkable what they accomplished. It really is. Now, I checked recruiting rankings before. They're not very high for this next year, but Deion's not big on the high school kids.
That's
He's
right.
big on the portal. So it's hard to totally judge him that way. But I thought it was a really cool moment for just, when are we ever going to see this again, Colin? He starts at 2 positions, corner, non-quarterbacks, one of the harder positions to play, and that's where everyone in the NFL is begging him to play. Like, please play corner, right?
Yeah, I think he'll be a better corner than an offensive player in the NFL. He's 185, 88 pounds. He'll probably be a corner. Because timing is such an essential part of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, it's hard for me to see an elite quarterback saying, yeah, okay, kid, you'll just be here for half the practice. I don't, that's just not, the Bradys, the Rodgers, the Staffords, like Goffs, they want you in on every snap, like the idea that you're going to be on the other side. But I do think if he goes to a really bad team, my guess is the Giants have.
He's going to a bad team because he's going to be. Yeah. He might be the first overall pick, Colin.
Well, I think the Giants, I would say, would take Shador Sanders. Vegas could take Cam Ward, maybe Travis Hunter. Maybe again, I could see Vegas going for Sam Darnold and saying we'll take Travis Hunter number 2. I could absolutely see that because not Telesco. And Cam Ward's interesting. Like, I don't know if that's the personality fit he wants, because Cam is edgy and Tom's not into that. But so my take, though, he's probably, again, for a bad team, play both ways. But I think he'll end up settling as a corner. Am I wrong?
Well, that's what everyone's pushing him to play. But when you look at the contracts, it pays to be a wide receiver, Colin.
That's what I wonder about.
I mean, Brandon Ayuk got 75 balls and he got $75 million and 30 a year. So and if you're good, now I don't know if he's Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase, but those guys get Nick Bosa money. So financially, now I do think we're going to see, everyone thought that Sauce Gardner was the greatest thing since Darrelle Revis and Richard Sherman. Well, actually the better player is Derek Stingley, and he's going to be up for a new contract. And I think, and even Sauce, if they get a new coach and he gets back to playing good football, you're talking 80 now. I think their numbers will get much higher with some of these younger Patrick Surtain, higher numbers at corner that will continue to rise. But the NFL wants them to play that because it's much easier to find a wide receiver. I can find a guy in the 3rd or 4th round who can catch me 80 balls. It's Sauce Gardner and Derek Stingley were top 5 picks. To get the high end guy, like Richard Sherman's an all-time outlier. A Hall of Fame level player that you find in the 5th round. Like, that doesn't happen very often at corner. Most guys are drafted high at that position. But like What if he wants to play both ways? My theory on that is I do think physically it's very hard to play corner against every team has good receivers now. So we said it was hard in college to go to the NFL to do it. It'd be hard to, maintain your health doing both, I think, at the NFL level. And two, if you're a team, if you're my starting corner, one of my starting wide receivers, if you get injured, I lose 2 spots, right? So it's kind of a weird spot to be in, right? It's why I thought one day, well, if you could pay him, could he just shatter records and get this unique contract because he's like Shohei Ohtani? Well, let's say in 5 years he actually does both, and I give him $150 million. Well, then he breaks his leg. I just lost my best wide receiver, my best corner. If Stingley gets hurt, I don't also lose Nico Collins, right?
That's right.
So it becomes a little. Listen, Dion was an awesome player to watch as a kid. They let Dion play some wide receiver to just make him happy, but he wasn't just running out every play with Michael Irvin or Jerry Rice, right? He's a dominated corner, which I think everyone's going to push him to be. But agents and money people go, well, look at these wide receivers, how much money they're making. So I wonder if it's going to be a little, tug of war on the business side. Also, the Shador thing. Could you Shador in Prime and the Mara family sign me up for that? Because you talk about it. Talk about a team that needs some life. Talk about a lifeless franchise right now.
I text Ian O'Connor, a very respected New York columnist, today, and I said, are they going to keep Brian Daboll? Is he safe? And his text to me, without getting into everything he said, was they would like to. But you've got planes flying overhead. They're getting blown out. The Jets, to their credit, they're playing their ass off today. They're Aaron, the last
playing
2
the Jags.
No, they are. But let me just give Aaron some credit here, because I know everybody thinks I pick on him. Just to give Aaron some credit. Let's see. Here we go. Aaron Rodgers. If you go look at Aaron in his last 7 games has 13 touchdowns, a pick, and 100 passer rating. So the Devontae thing, if you watch today, they've got a real relationship now. It takes time. So Aaron and Devontae are cooking. I like their personnel. It's I said last week on FS1, I kind of thought the Giants had a brighter future, but it looks like to me the New York Giants have quit on Brian Daboll.
I would agree. I thought that game was the Ravens looked like it was a practice. It was a joke. Say this about the Jets, that they threw up a stat, down the stretch of the game. I think they've lost 5 games with fourth quarter leads, and coming into today they were 0-7 in games decided by less than a touchdown. So they have been in a lot of these games.
Oh yeah,
I think people could make the argument is, listen, they were never going to take out the Bills to win the East, but this season could easily be closer to 500 if a couple things go right for them. Now today, because part of it, right? Remember, their schedule started hard and it got easier at the end, and they lost.
So they won 32-25 and had 400 yards of offense.
Yeah, no, Aaron was good today. Like if they got that Aaron, now again, they're playing the Jags, who have an awful defense or just a bad team. But if he played like that, they would be okay. And like you said, Devontae, even Lazard, they had a play that he dropped a ball. Aaron was putting it. One thing I had been critical on Aaron is like, God, has he lost his just pure accuracy that made him such a special player? Today, he was hitting guys in the hands constantly, and he wasn't missing the layup plays. And yeah, it'll be fascinating to see what happens there. They got a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Tannenbaum running this search. I think John Mara, I think he's just hesitant to just keep firing people over and over. But like, what are you supposed to do? Like, this ain't working out.
Yeah, McAdoo and Shermer and Sala.
Judge.
Or not Sala, excuse me.
Joe Judge.
McAdoo, Judge, Shermer, Sala's Jets. Yeah, Aaron went 16-30, 290 yards, 3 touchdowns. He also ran 6 times and averaged 7.5 yards a run. So whereas Kirk Cousins off of surgery and 40 has, it's gone off the cliff, Aaron's actually, I think last week in a losing cause, last 2 weeks I've watched Aaron, I thought he's been really good.
I would agree. He's been way better than he was early in the season, which is kind of, I would guess if you're a Jets fan or just someone that like he might be on the team, somewhat optimistic, you would think it would go the other way. Older player, 40, 41 years old, would fall off a cliff as the season went on. He's actually still has a lot of energy. Kind of hit me today watching those two teams, because at one point in time, it looked like the Jets were going to lose. Devontae had like 200 yards today. Is it kind of crazy that the NFL hitting all-time popularity with the Jets and the Giants, really for the last decade plus, being just atrocious football teams?
I said this recently. The most successful teams in this league are Kansas City, Green Bay, Baltimore, Buffalo. Those are your franchises. The New York teams are a mess. Chicago's a mess. Until this year, D.C., fifth, sixth biggest city in the country, was a mess. A high-profile team like Pittsburgh, not a Super Bowl contender. Like, you start looking around, Dallas, the biggest brand in the league, really regressing quickly. It is remarkable. In the NBA, you've got, New York's viable. I mean, the Warriors are still viable. The Lakers won in the bubble several years ago. I mean, Dallas is good. That's a big market team. Philadelphia is good. Boston's good. Those are big market cities. Houston, another big market, interesting. Hawks playing well in Atlanta. And their ratings are circling
Crazy.
the drain. The
Crazy.
NFL's biggest markets are a mess. And in a lot of instances, they're unwatchable. And it just shows the power of the NFL. I think there's a lot of reasons the NFL is king. It's relatable. We watch it. We bet it. It's built for television. There's one game a week. As society gets wider and more distracting, it's one game a week. I think that's a huge part of it. But college football ratings are up, and women's basketball ratings are up, and March Madness was up. The NBA continues to just not – I think the load management, I think the aesthetics, everybody's shooting 43s, and I think they have their best players in the wrong markets. But I don't know if a league is bulletproof, but, I mean, I sit around and I can't wait for Sundays. I mean, the early window today was pretty awful. It was the worst.
Terrible.
It was the worst early window of the season, but I couldn't wait for the afternoon. And I think that's the power of the sport. It just makes me think about it before the day starts.
I also think the explosion of college football, the NIL, the transfer portal, now the playoffs, you're just watching the incoming talent. So you just get to basically, fans get to scout. It's pretty clear all the best teams have the best players. That's why I actually think Belichick is going to be, I mean, how many big time games? I would imagine over the next couple of weeks, they got money to spend, going to land some transfer portal guys. I just saw they kept the best recruit they had in the class was a quarterback. They kept him. Like, if they are interesting next year, that just bleeds into the NFL because it's all kind of layered now, I feel like. Starts on Saturday. I don't know about you. It was nice, actually, to take a deep breath. It's been a long season. But I did also miss, with a lot of respect for the Army-Navy guys. Love the over in that game. Both those two teams have been scoring a lot of points. But I missed just the SEC game or Ohio State or Michigan. There just wasn't anything. It was weird. It was a weird feeling yesterday without it. It really was.
John Middlekauff, former NFL scout, 3 and Out. We do our hour to hour 15. We do it every Sunday. I'm going to go when I watch the Packers. I'm crossing my fingers. I have them -2.5. I do not remember having an 0 for 4 early day. And not only did I go 0 for 4, all of my teams got run. I mean, I was on the run. I almost picked Denver to win and cover. I got talked out of it. Shame on me. But I've had better weeks.
I dare you to pick the Raiders tomorrow on television. I kind of like them. They're bound to take someone out down the stretch. A weird game. The Falcons are ripe to be taken out.
I thought that about Cleveland today, and boy, was I wrong.
Yeah. See you, Colin.